Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and in this video we're going to be going over the changes coming to Ninja in Final Fantasy XIV's next expansion, Stormblood. Now the footage you're seeing here is actually me getting to play on a Stormblood development build of some kind back at the North American Media Tour a couple weeks ago, so I do have some hands-on experience with Ninja. However, Ninja was one of the last jobs I was able to get to in the day, and I was pretty crammed for time, so there's only a little bit less than a minute of footage here. But I'll still do my best to explain the Ninja changes, which I spent quite some time getting used to. As you can see, there are some cuts in the video. Some of the footage wasn't usable for some reason or another, so this is what we got. Anyway, keep in mind, anything I say here, any number you see, anything at all, is still subject to change before June 16th when Stormblood hits early access. So while this should give you a general idea of what's going on, don't take it as how things will definitively be when it comes out. So first of all, let's go over some of the familiar abilities, things that stayed the same or saw slight changes with 4.0. So first of all, in terms of combos, Armor Crush and Aeolian Edge combos are pretty much the same. Shadowfang is still there, but it's no longer immediately off of Spinning Slash. Instead, Shadowfang has replaced Dancing Edge as a 3-part combo. It now applies both Shadowfang's damage over time effect and the slashing debuff, and Dancing Edge is completely gone. Shadeshift is still there, Hide is still there, but Hide has a new effect that actually makes it a little more useful than it was before. Whenever you hide, the cooldown on your ninjutsu is reset. Now you still can't use it in combat, but basically the first thing that pops up into my head is that it negates the 20-second pull timer we've needed all this time, because you can just Huton, hide, and then your ninjutsu is reset. It's also good for dungeons because you can use Hide in between pulls in order to get your ninjutsu back more frequently. Let's see, Assassinate still the same, Throwing Dagger is still the same, Mug is mostly the same, but it now also generates 30 gauge. We'll talk about Ninja's gauge in a little bit. Trick Attack is the same, but Sneak Attack is gone, for anyone wondering. Jugulate's still there, and it even still has its silence effect. All 3 Mudras and all their combinations are still there. Dream Within a Dream is still there, although it saw a slight potency buff. Duality is still there, but interesting note, I mentioned this in my Bard video as well. Duality still doesn't allow you to critically hit. However, DPS are getting a new stat called Direct Hit, which is basically like a mini crit that occurs more frequently than big crits. So you can actually land direct hits with Duality. Shadewalker, Smokescreen, Kasatsu, and Death Blossom are all still there. Shikuchi is still there, but there's a new trait where Shikuchi's cooldown is reset every time you use Raiton or Suiton, so you should actually get far more use out of it than you did before. Now let's talk about some of the things that are gone. Your poisons are gone, and their damage buffs are now traits for Ninja. Jugulate and Mug have had their base effects of silencing and stealing, and you cannot modify them by choosing a poison anymore. So there's no turning Jugulate into a stun, for example. That's gone. As I said earlier, Sneak Attack and Dancing Edge are both gone, but also Mutilate is gone, and Goad is now a cross-roll ability. So what's new with Ninja? Well, the big thing is their Ninki gauge. So basically you generate 6 Ninki every time you auto attack, and also as we mentioned earlier, Mug generates 30 Ninki. What can you use Ninki for? Well, it's used with pretty much all of your new skills. All of them require 80 gauge, but keep in mind that the gauge does stack all the way up to 100. So your most basic use for Ninki is your Hellfrog medium. It's the giant frog with the giant AoE that you've seen in plenty of videos at this point. And it's just a 400 potency AoE. It's got no cooldown. It's strictly gated by how often you can get to 80 Ninki. You also have a new single target attack, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Bavakakra. It's a 550 potency off global cooldown skill on a 50-second cooldown. Also costs 80 gauge. Finally, you have Tenchi Jin, which is what I've been calling the Ninja Ley Lines. There's a lot of rules to this, so I'll try to go through it as slowly as possible. So its first effect, it reduces the cooldown of your next 2 ninjutsu skills to 1 second. This means that you can do 3 ninjutsus back to back, because you'll have the ninjutsu and use it, then it'll reduce the cooldown of the next one to 1 second, and then reduce the cooldown of the third one to 1 second. So you'll use it to do 3 ninjutsu back to back. The more confusing thing that it does is eliminates Mudra consumption upon executing ninjutsu. Basically, after you've used a ninja sign or one of the mudras, it will remember that for the rest of its duration, and it will not toss it aside. I'm going to have to give you an example to explain it properly. So let's say you start by using 10 and doing Fuma Shuriken. It's not going to forget that you use 10. So next, let's say you use Chi. That'll be a Raiton because it remembers the 10 you did before and then adds the Chi on top of it to make a Raiton. Then, by adding Jin on the end, you'll finally be able to execute a Suiton, since that's the result of a Tenchi Jin, which is of course the name of the ability itself. So it would look like this: Ten, Fuma, Chi, Raiton, Jin, Suiton. That's what it would look like when you're using this ability. That's obviously not the only scenario. There are other 2- and 3-part skills that you have, but that's the most basic one to describe. Now, on top of all of this, which already sounds good, it also doubles the potency of any ninjutsu performed under this effect for 10 seconds. Now, keep in mind, Huton still has a maximum duration of 70 seconds, so no, you can't use this to make Huton 140 seconds. And the final big thing, all weapon skills and other abilities are made unavailable during this ability. So you can only use your mudras and your ninjutsu until you've completed the chain and the effect has worn off. In other words, if you bunny during this, you're way more boned than you ever were doing a normal bunny. And of course I did a bunny in the video, moving on. Listen, I didn't understand how it worked yet. I'm explaining it to you now. I learned from my mistakes, okay? And final little detail, it has a 100-second cooldown. The main thing I'm pulling with all this is Ninja has had more of the ninja identity brought out over its base class Rogue, and honestly, it's pretty fun. I said this isn't the only footage I have, it's just the only workable footage that I had, but I did mess around with Ninja for at least several minutes longer and spent a lot of time trying to understand how these new skills worked into the rotation, and honestly, it didn't feel all that different. It still felt mostly the same as the way it was before, but integrating Tenchi Jin and Bavakakra into your actual rotation is something that takes a little bit more finesse now than it did before. It isn't abundantly clear when first looking at this exactly how you're going to use it. So it should shake up some ninja rotations a little bit while giving you that very ninja-esque feel. There's a lot of ninja themes here. Before I forget though, melee crossroll. I've already mentioned it in some of my other melee videos, but I'm not going to tell you to go watch those ones. Let's talk about it here. So some of the familiar abilities: Second Wind, Invigorate, Bloodbath is actually a melee crossroll now, and Goad. So all the melee DPS can now take Goad. It's not solely a ninja responsibility. Leg Sweep is now an off global cooldown stun with no damage for all melee. Since Jugulate cannot be turned into a stun anymore, if you want a stun, that is your sole source for it. Arm's Length is also another ability that's just, I've been really perplexed by it. It puts a shield around you, and anyone who attacks you receives a slow debuff. It doesn't prevent damage or anything like that. It's just anything that attacks you while you have Arm's Length active has their attack speed slowed. Really weird unless that's actually going to be useful in the expansion. They also got Diversion, which is basically quelling strikes for melee. Ninja never really had issues with enmity before, so I don't know how much I expect them to really take Diversion. Now, if you watch some of my other videos, you know that Virus was changed into Addle for caster DPS. Well, Feint is basically the melee half of what the previous Virus did. It reduces strength and dexterity of the enemy. So if you need to do that, the melee crossrolls are the ones that have to take it. Now, I was already confused by Arm's Length, but every time I read Crutch, it confuses me as well. Crutch lets you remove a party member's bind/heavy effects, but you can't use it on yourself. The fact that this kind of skill is being put in the crossroll is almost a signal to me that those are going to be very important debuffs in the expansion. And the final crossroll ability is Truenorth, which removes positional requirements for a short time. Now, I think in my other videos I specifically said for weapon skills, but because Ninja has Trick Attack and I was kind of curious, I went back and reread it. Apparently, Truenorth says it nullifies all positional requirements, period, which for Ninja would mean, theoretically, that you can Trick Attack from the front. Not that that's something you do, but there are some bosses where you're supposed to stack up and you can't really get to the rear for a prolonged period of time. So situations where you can do that, this will help increase your potency in situations like that with Aeolian Edge, Armor Crush, and of course, not making you kind of fall out of position just to get your Trick Attack up. Overall, I'm really excited for Ninja. You know, I left Ninja behind quite some time ago because I really wanted to play other jobs. I ended up landing on Machinist, but looking at some of the jobs that I hold interest in now, post 4.0, Bard, Machinist, Monk, honestly Ninja a little bit. I'm really curious to see how these changes play out. Especially with some of the changes to hide. That just seems like such a satisfying thing to do in a dungeon. To hit the hide, to unhide, and then to just have your ninjutsu back pretty much every pull. Not needing to do things like 20-second countdowns or worry about pugs pulling before a 20-second countdown goes off. A lot of quality of life things, a lot of extra damage, and again, feel like a ninja, pretty much. Remember, I am Ninja, he is Ninja, she is Ninja too. On that note, though, I'm going to wrap up this video. Thank you for watching. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share. And stay tuned for all the latest Stormblood information, news guides, everything. Because you know, because you've heard me say it in a million videos. Anyway, I'll see you in the next one. And until then, take care.